My guest today on Fair Folk at Work has experienced both the fair and the world of librarianship, and in that we both share two things in common. I'm referring, of course, to my good friend, Shirleigh Brannon. Hi, Shirley.
Hello, Dan. Thank you for letting me be part of this. I'm
Well,
honored.
thank you for, in addition to waving, saying something. So that makes this that much more entertaining as a podcast. Well done. Let me start off with the first traditional question. Who was the first person to say to you, let's go out to fair? And what did they say to get you to go there?
That would have been my new friend, Siraj Corey. And my, at the time, sweetheart and I had just moved to Davis because I was just going to graduate school at UC Davis. And
Mhm.
he had gotten a new job at Davis working for the telephone switchboard. So this was one of his new coworkers. And she found out that I had a background in theater, and she found out that we both liked folk music and all this. And she said, "You should come to the Renaissance Fair." And we said, what's a Renaissance Fair? So again, this would be in 1981. I had already gotten my master's degree in theater at San Francisco State, and we'd been living in San Francisco in the 70s, but we had no idea that there was a Renaissance Fair in Marin County. I'm not sure I was even quite sure where Marin County was.
What is the first impression of fair that you can recall?
First
So,
impression of fair was that it was very colorful. Literally, just a lot going on there visually, lots of micro stages, performing areas. My other impression of it was that there were people with all different levels of performance skills and abilities there. There were some people that seemed to me to be very clearly theater people. They were poised, they were sending clean messages. And then there seemed to be a lot of people who were just having a lot of fun. And I couldn't sometimes tell who was there in a costume having fun and who was there in a costume doing something that they were actually supposed to be doing, because there was this happy mishmash of people bouncing off of each other.
how did you place yourself into this mismatch? In what role?
Well, the very first couple of times that we went, I didn't really know because it was so new to me. I was intrigued by the public performance part because I am a theater person, even though I've never been an actor. I still don't consider myself an actor, by the way. I'm a dramaturg. That's what I am. I'm a theater historian outside of being a librarian. They're connected. But I just remember thinking, well, this seems like fun. This seems like a really, really, really fun hobby. And I'd also been taking up Scottish dance, and so I wanted to be part of maybe dancing or something, but I wasn't sure where I fit in. And so we got fair ever passes that first year, and we just came back. The next year was the last year that Clan Colin was performing. And so I used to just go chain watch Clan Colin because I loved the Scottish music. And also I would go chain watch St. Patrick's.
Who was the first person that you talked to at either of these clans and said, can I do what you do?
The first person that I talked to who actually was inviting to me
Hmm.
was Roger Clugston, who was the fiddler for St. Patrick's. And that really didn't happen that first year that we were there. That first year that we were there, I talked to Ellerin Francis, the late Ellerin Francis, who I still really miss because he co-founded Shimsalahela with me. But Ellerin was one of the dancers for Clan Colin. He was just so welcoming. I knew Ellerin, but Rory was the first person that I was talking to about fair and what was I doing there. And he said, well, why aren't you working with St. Patrick's? And I said, well, how do I do that? I mean, I had no clue, right? He goes,
Hmm.
well, you just show up and say you want to be part of St. Patrick's. And I'm thinking, I don't have to audition. I just show up. What? And so he goes, no, he goes, you'd be perfect. As you know so much about Irish history. Clearly you belong part of our group. And I thought, huh, sure. So I signed up to be on board with St. Patrick's that same year. I went up and talked to, I can't remember anymore if it was Dunford. I think it was Don Ferdinand, but it might have still been Alan Lacey at that point. They went back and forth a lot between
Hmm.
who was guildmaster, and was like, sure, come on board. Like, cool. Got involved with the group that way. answer the question, it was Rory. He was the first person I met at Fair who was actively welcoming of me as, come on down, join the fun.
I'm not sure if this next question actually fits with your life. There is quite a spectrum of people at Fair their first year or their first years. There are some people their mom gave them money to start a booth and were just gung-ho and thought it was the best thing ever. There are others whose parents thought this was the road to Satan in hell and sort of threw them out of the house. And it was years before they were reconciled. On that continuum, how would you say your parents dealt with you becoming both a master's in Irish music history and going out and becoming a performer out at the fair?
Oh, the short answer is I was in my 20s by the time I moved to California. I grew up in actually a blue collar working class, dirt poor, Scots Irish, if you will, family back in the Midwest. But we did not do Irish music or Scottish music in my family growing up. My parents, my mother was a storyteller. My father worked for the state highway road as a road maintenance worker. We lived in a house that he mostly built himself. It had indoor plumbing. It had a toilet and a sink. There you go. That's the house I grew up in. But we did grow up surrounded by folk music, but it's Appalachian and old-timey music and dance. So I grew up in a folk music and dance family of working class, blue collar, lower class, shanty level people. It's quite different from the way a lot of folks who are younger than me and who
What
grew
was
up
the family response for young Shirleigh going off to college to study?
Well,
however you described it to them, because it clearly wasn't like English or engineering or dentistry or something.
Well, so I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was my older two siblings of mine, and I were the only three to get through high school. My older siblings and that didn't even make it through high school. My parents did not have high school. My father dropped out of school in the 6th grade to go work in a pig iron factory. I mean, just it was a different lifestyle. But so their response to me my whole life was pretty much, it's the baby girl. She's weird. She likes writing. I didn't originally want to be a theater person either. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an artist. All through grade school, high school, I was constantly writing poetry. I was doing a lot of creative writing. I was published in art magazines. I even won a poetry competition at the local community college and had one of my poems published in a national publication. But so when I first
you needed scholarships and things like that?
I did, and I went to Oberlin College in Ohio. I'm very proud to be a yeoman, to be a free thinker. Because if anybody knows anything about Oberlin, they know that the college has a long free thinking tradition. So my parents had already had to come to the grips with the fact that their baby girl was A, an atheist, B, was not going to stay in Ohio and get married and have a bunch of grandchildren for them. And because I'd already started working in theater as well in like the 6th grade and then working at the local college in the summers on a program for low income students to be able to get summer jobs. And I got lucky and got to work at the college summer theater company for money starting when I was 16. So that's what I spent my time doing was being involved in theater or writing for the local art publication. So that's me in high school, working summer stock at the local college theater company. Again, in my hometown was what I did pretty much all my summers at Oberlin until my senior year when I got to work at Oberlin in the summer stock productions there. They didn't understand me at all, but I will say that they loved me and they were willing to accept 7th child was weird. And so they emotionally supported me as much as they could, even though I was the one who didn't want to follow the family tradition of living somewhere within a half an hour drive, and being local.
I remember looking at one of your Facebook posts many years ago, and you credited your dad with, I think that he had gone to one of your shows.
Yep.
And he said something on the order of, why is every damn dance the same? And you phrased it as integral to your development as sort of coming out of academia and how to be an entertainer, entertaining an audience, rather than being artistically pure and boring the hell out of them. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's close enough for jazz. I mean, he didn't make the distinctions I did. And this is the most important part of all of this, Dan, is most of all what I got from my father, who was a musician, a folk musician and a dancer, and had never had a day of training in his life. He just, that's what you did in my family. You played music, you picked up an instrument, you learned how to play it. People sang, you sang along. My dad danced. He was a flat foot clogger. I did have a friend at one point, and this is super important to me and Shimsa, if this helps what I've done with her all these years, is that you learn by watching people and getting up and doing it. And so in the old-timey tradition and the flat foot tradition and all that, I just grew up with that's what you did. You just did it. And all the cousins did it. And we called it clogging. As an adult, after I'd started Shimsa, one of my friends once said to me, well, did your dad flatfoot? Was he a clogger more like Buck White? Or did he dance more like Thomas Maupin? And I said, he danced like my dad. He didn't dance like this expert or that expert. He danced the way he danced, and all the rest of us danced the way that you dance when you're people and you're just doing it from your heart. And that to me is a huge part of what I have always brought to faire, integrated into whether it was St. Patrick's, less so, or St. Bridget's when I helped start that, but especially Shimsa all these years and continuing on now with whatever I do at Dickens Fair. It's that idea that you invite people to be part of this because it's a very human thing to do. We sing, we dance, we make music because we are humans. And when we start letting ourselves take away from people, including ourselves, permission to do that because we're not an expert, then we have just subverted, I feel really passionately about this, the most basic thing that we have as humans. We sing, we dance, we make music. How dare we have the audacity to take that away from someone else because they're not a professional or because people don't pay money to watch them? That's who we are.
Well,
We
let
write,
me
we talk. Okay, I'm sorry, but just that's
no, I'm going to
really.
well, I'm going to push back a little bit and feel free to tell me how I'm wrong.
No, that's okay, Dan. And I'm sorry if I'm just being too tangential. I can
No,
be.
I like tangential. On one hand, you're a dramaturg,
Mhm,
and so you're interested in the study and the origins of things, and that keeping that continuity
mhm.
sort of alive in the production you're doing. Is that
Right,
basically right?
right.
And so that puts you in the position of authority and in the position of saying, this is what the artist intended, this is what the tradition is. On the other hand, the tradition of people just coming up and singing and dancing just because it's in their heart, I would say is the opposite of that. One is sort of filtered by an academic process. The other is more this is how dad danced. This is how I'm going to feel like I'm going to dance with dad.
I can see how it can come across as a dichotomy, and perhaps it's my own human ability to cognitive dissonance to reconcile different
Mm-hmm.
paradigms within myself. I see it as a continuum. I see it as a Mobius strip almost, because as a dramaturg, I don't expect somebody who's looking at a production of Aeschylus, let's say, to understand everything about the Greek worldview. But if I'm going to do a production of, say, the Trojan Women, then my production of the Trojan Women may or may not be historically 100% accurate. We may not be dressed in the gowns and have the periactoi and blah, blah, blah. But we've picked that play because it is a play about women being victims in horrible, horrible circumstances of war. It's about the tragedy of what people do to each other in war. And that is something that paradigm, that feeling, that grief, that outrage is something that is so innately human that it still translates across centuries. It's something that's very human. So to me, it is true that I have friends who are competitive champion step dancers. Ellerin was a competitive champion Highland dancer. I teach Irish dance. I teach people, you can do this way, or you can do it this way, or you can do it this way, or you can do it this way. This comes from East Clare around here. This comes from County Kerry. This dance I got from so-and-so from there. So I try to retain my provenance, but it would never occur to me to tell somebody if they're just starting out as a beginner, oh, well, no, actually, you have to hold your feet crossed over into 120 degrees and be up on the tippy toes, because that's a more modern way of doing it.
Mhm.
They can get to that point if they want to. If they really get into this, they can start to specialize. But when I meet people where they are, I just want them to get up and have something in their heart and their soul that responds to this jig or this reel, this music. I want them to hear it, and I want to show them a few very basic moves that over generations connect with that, are a way within a tradition
Mhm.
of connecting with that. But if they want to go on after that and become modern competitive dancers, they can. If they want to get into studying Sean-Nós dancing, and all the different regional versions of Sean-Nós dancing, they can, because that's more and more frosting that you can put on your cake to learn to be a specialist in things. I think it's important that we keep that knowledge alive because it is part of our history of ourselves as humans. But I think it's important to not lose track of the fact that before you can become a dramaturg or a champion Irish dancer or in anything else that we do, or that somewhere along the line you had to feel that in your soul. That had to be something that you did as a human being. And we don't all start out as champions. So to me, that's all consistent with each other, because that's all part of being human, is learning things at different levels, but also being able to hold into your heart that we don't try to say that there's only this one narrow way that you can do any of those things, because each of us meets music, dance, art, poetry, language in our own souls. And all we can do is nurture one another in whatever path we want to go. Very wordy. You might be sorry you asked, but that really is how I feel about
No,
all.
I'm fascinated. I'm going to actually switch gears a little bit here and get back to fair experiences and what you've learned at fair. And this is a new question.
Sure.
But have you ever had a bad show where, and what did you learn from having a bad show? What
Chance
I'm
to make it.
talking about, not as, things that happen that are funny, haha, because the bucket didn't fall the right way or something like that. There was like a fundamentally bad show. And it's, let me tell you what I'm thinking of, and then maybe
Sure.
that'll help. My third year at fair, I think they told us we had to be period.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you're aware that Machiavelli wrote a comedy, but there's really no humor in it that we found. And it was one of those shows that by the end of the first weekend, we knew that this was not going to be any fun ever.
Okay. I've never had one of those shows. I
Oh,
mean,
okay. Well,
I know that sounds,
congratulations.
I I've been part of bad shows before that other people did, where the audience was bored, or where it wasn't holding an audience
Do you know why they didn't were not holding their audience?
because they weren't engaged with the audience.
And I would say that in this show, we tried to be sort of two period, and that was not, nobody really cared. And but what that show told me very clearly was that fair is on one hand, a very easy audience. They'll sit and sort of be engaged for a moment, but you have to keep continually re-engaging them and showing them something entertaining or fun.
That makes perfect sense to me. Um, I guess the way I would phrase it, in my world, there's the SCA and there's fair. There's doing something for yourself. I'm in this costume because I want to be in this costume and I want to be play acting this character. And it doesn't the audience is there to see me being brilliant.
Hmm.
But to me, I'm not trying to slag reenactors, or honestly, that's their hobby. That's cool. As I was talking, I'm not a reenactor. If I haven't got an audience and I'm not gigging with that audience and getting energy from them one way or the other, I'm not happy. I got better things to do than dress up in some expensive goddamn costume. That does not get my rocks off. My rocks get off when I'm working with children in story times, or getting an audience member up and teaching them how to do a dance, or making people sing along with me, or sing out to an audience member, winking at them and getting them to wink back. I'm having fun when I'm interacting with an audience and watching their joy come back to me. And so I will do anything I can. And when I used to teach drama, I also taught my kids this. It's not about you. It is not about you, the performer. It is all about that audience. And every step of the way, I don't care what fun thing you're doing in terms of historical accuracy, if you're not actively somehow reaching out to that audience and inviting them, teaching them, helping them learn how to be part of what it is you're doing, how are they going to appreciate the fun? And so then why are you doing it in front of an audience? You could just go do it someplace else all by yourself. And there'd be nothing wrong with that. But if you can't hold an audience, it's because you're not really respecting your audience enough to bring them on board with what you're doing.
And I didn't realize it as much at the time as I do now. But Faire actually did give us an audience to play with pretty much all day, every weekend.
Right.
And if something didn't work, there would be another clump of people 2 minutes down the road. And I would also say that that's what I liked about doing a reference interview, was that it was that same sense of one-on-one,
Yep.
creating a bond temporarily, and then sharing what I knew with them, and then they would go away presumably richer for the experience.
May I ask you a question about that then? And this is going to
Okay.
be from a reference point of view. When you are working with a patron as a reference librarian, would you not say that, again, part of that reference interview, that one-on-one, is that you're still actively engaged with them? You're learning from them, you're feeding them ideas and getting response from them, and using that to shift your own approach, maybe give
Sure.
you new information. And so that to me is absolutely hand and parcel with the best of what we did at Faire, which is that it is, again, that interactive thing, that we're reading them, we're changing what we do slightly, or reshifting what we do based on that information that that audience is giving us. And it doesn't just have to be on stage, especially at Faire. I think a lot of street performing was very much like that. One of the great things about street performing, for me, when I saw the folks that I thought were just brilliant at it, is that they were actively taking that time to engage with people in the audience. I think of Louisa being, the big white dress, being royal, but then she would also get off that big white dress, or she would, even when she was up on the carriage, she would take time, the litter, she would take time and she would make eye contact with people in the audience. So she made it a very personal thing for selected audience members. She did not keep the fourth wall in place.
Not at all. She was brilliant.
And I think that's what I always saw you doing the times that I saw you and Mark. I mean, Mark, were doing your thing, but you were also making the eye contact a lot, engaging people, smiling with them, helping the audience member feel seen and appreciated and welcomed into your world.
There's probably something that's more of a librarian secret, which I like to pass along to younguns as librarians as they come in. And this is an extension on that, is that even though you're engaging with the customer or audience back and forth, and you're letting them into the play,
Right.
you as librarian slash street performer are ultimately in control.
Absolutely.
You know more than the patron, and you know sort of how this thing is going to play out.
Yep.
And so you can give some authority to the patron and not become a lesser person by conceding that.
I think the other thing that ties onto that, the idea that you're also using neutral questioning theory. You're trying to get them to articulate a little bit more, whatever the hell this weird ass thing is that they've got in their head, so that you can figure out if you can't get them the answer that they want, that they've decided they want. But then you start to help them kind of reframe their question a little bit and what the possibilities are for answering that question. And I think that's the same thing though with street performing. Again, you walk up to an audience member or on stage and you give them something, and if it doesn't work and you just go, well, that didn't work, bite me. That's one thing. But if then you go, well, what about this? Try this. Will this work? Will this suit you? And if the third time they say no, you go, okay, fine, that's cool. I'll hit up this other person over here who might be into it, because you're in charge, I'm in charge, we're the person who's running the show. We have to give up some of that power and that authority to our audience member, and then we have to be willing to roll with them a little bit.
I'm going to switch gears here.
Oh, go ahead.
This is another question that has raised a wide spectrum of responses. And for those of you listening at home, I'm holding my hands about 2 feet apart. And the thesis statement is, faire is a great place to raise kids. And I've had parents and moms and dads and people say, yes, I loved having my kid at faire. I think they grew up much better, and there are much better people in the world now. I have other people say, what the hell are you talking about? You're an idiot. Where on the faire is a great place, I would never put a kid in faire spectrum, are you?
Do I think faire was a bad place for him to have spent his early years? I'm neutral on that, because I think growing up in the faire environment gave him a perspective on being around people in a performing aspect that has probably helped him out at points in his life in terms of dealing with a lot of different people. As opposed to being cloistered in.
The pro-faire camp would argue that 2 things. One is that it's a literal village to raise a child. 2, that it allows children to see their parents in a play environment. And the third thing is that there are sort of more opportunities for kids to have semi-responsibilities. Some people have had their kids be at court and be little nobles, that kind of thing.
I mean, I can see that. My response to, well, it gives children the opportunity to see their parents in a play environment. I grew up being part of my father and my grandmother and my extended family playing music and dance. It wasn't faire, but it was something that we all got together and did. That was a creative thing that we all could do together. And that gave me that opportunity. I have friends whose parents were professional musicians. And so they got to, they were invited to always come, and be part of that. Or people who grew up in other kinds of hobbies where if you could do this thing with your parents, it was great. You got to see your parents as something other than this authoritarian person. No, I mean, I think giving our children opportunity to see us being human beings, full human beings, not just their parents, but folks with our own interests and loves and hobbies, which we invite them to join in if they want to. And we support them if they don't, and whatever they do want to do. And then I think, yeah, absolutely, it can go both ways.
I am kind of running out of things to say. Last thing I can think of. Imagine, if you will, a world where you have just won the Phyllis Patterson Lifetime Achievement Award in faire something. Give me your acceptance speech. The band will not cut you off.
Well, I'm happy to accept any sort of award that has the name Phyllis Patterson in it, not because I was ever great friends with Phyllis Patterson. She probably didn't know who I was, but largely because from what I've learned over the years about Phyllis, both from what she and Ron created, but then also a little bit learning more about her various visions and projects. She was a person who was, it seems to me, to be very invested in ideas of how to get people to learn more about the world and humanity through joy. The path that she took to that joy was what we would now call a form of living history, to look back and reflect on the experiences of people hundreds of years ago and find those paradigms, those joys, those thrills, those hurts, those happinesses that we can connect to across humanity. So the idea that I may have also, through working with people at the fair and other themed events, been able to bring someone else into a paradigm, a little bit of a paradigm shift of understanding the great joy that humans have in song, dance, performance, language, and words. To be even in the same sentence as somebody who did as much to encourage that as Phyllis did is a great honor to me, because she was, if nothing else, filled with wonder. When you look at pictures of her, when you look at some of the things that she wrote, there's always wonder there. It's like you're talking to Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. There is so much wonder there and so much delight. So that's what I think we would all aspire to be, someone who is influential in bringing that to others.
Okay. Would you like to add anything else?
The other thing I'm going to add, now that I've accepted my my Phyllis speech, is to say that and throughout the years, whether it was St. Patrick's, the Guild of St. Patrick's, or my baby, which was Shimsa, which ran in one form or another for 40 years, and what I do nowadays at Dickens Fair with Agan Cayley, is what we all do at the fair, and maybe that great thing that we've all always done at the fair, which is to try to bring people into our world, which is a world of connecting with other humans, of learning about something we didn't know about before, but to see ourselves as part of a much bigger continuum of humanity. And maybe by doing that, even though this sounds pie in the sky, maybe if we can help people see enough of those connections between all of us as humans who love, who laugh, who sing, who cry through the arts, then maybe we can make the world a better place.
That was my January 2023 interview with Shirleigh Brannon. You can forward your questions and comments to Shirley through me at djng@earthlink.net. Questions or comments about the podcast itself can also be directed to me at djng@earthlink.net. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Fair Folk at Work, you can also email me at djng@earthling.net. That's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.